Crude prices soar 27%, and somehow one of the biggest oil companies on the planet manages to post negative free cash flow. Welcome to Earnings Unscripted. It is May 1st, 2026. Today we are unpacking Chevron, ticker CVX, and their honestly bizarre first quarter.
Yeah, bizarre is definitely the word. I mean, EPS came in at 1.11, down 20%, but the free cash flow, it dropped from 5.5 billion positive last quarter to negative 1.5 billion. That is the actual shocker.
Right. And before we try to solve that massive missing money mystery, just a quick reminder for everyone listening, this is not financial advice, just our personal opinions on the market.
Right. Please do your own math.
Please do. But Miro, look, revenue was $48.61 billion. That is down 7%. And the stock price behavior was fascinating because the stock basically trended up the entire quarter, right? A really steady 38% climb.
Pretty much an uninterrupted climb.
Yeah. And then earnings day hits, the stock gets incredibly choppy in extended hours, and it eventually fades to close down about 1.5%. So what actually spooked everybody?
Accounting. Mostly accounting. The crude price spiked way too fast in March, so they got caught in this massive working capital drain. We are talking almost $4.6 billion just trapped in rising receivables and inventory.
Okay, wait. You're saying a good oil market actually destroyed their books for the quarter?
Absolutely. The mark-to-market losses on their paper hedges hit the ledger immediately, but because they use last-in, first-out accounting, the recognized value of the physical crude lags. It's a roughly $3 billion timing penalty on the downstream business.
That is wild. It sounds like they're running too hot for their own balance sheet to keep up.
It's essentially a structural lag, though to be fair, their U.S. upstream business is an absolute fortress right now. Earnings leaped 68% there. That's the Permian and the new Hess legacy assets doing exactly what they bought them to do.
And they're doing some completely non-traditional things just to keep their legacy supply chains moving, like CEO Mike Wirth openly blasted California energy policy on the call. They literally had to use waivers and invoke the Defense Production Act just to get Gulf crude through the Panama Canal to their El Segundo refinery.
Exactly. They're taking emergency measures to bypass a heavily constrained system, which actually connects perfectly to this massive, very quiet artificial intelligence deal they're working on in West Texas.
Oh, right. The exclusive Microsoft data center power agreement. Yes, I definitely want to unpack that. All right, let's get into the details.
So the traditional E&P operators are basically skipping the middleman entirely now. They entered an exclusivity agreement with Microsoft and this investment firm, Engine Number One, for an AI power project out in West Texas. They are effectively cutting out the local utilities to supply natural gas power directly to these hyperscale data centers.
Which makes total sense. I mean, if you are Microsoft building massive server farms, you cannot wait around a decade for the grid to upgrade.
Exactly. The grid is just too slow. And Mike Wirth confirmed they are moving toward a final investment decision later this year. They already started ordering turbines, so this is not just theoretical.
They're literally plugging Microsoft straight into the Permian Basin. That is such a wild collision of industries to me.
It really is. Wirth actually gave a great quote on the call. He said, let me get the exact phrasing here. I think we can find a place to meet where Microsoft's expectations on power prices and our expectations on return on investment can both be satisfied.
Right, which translates to Microsoft has deep pockets and we have the gas.
Pretty much.
But you know what I am stuck on, Miro? Let us go back to that massive working capital drain. Almost $4.6 billion just vaporized into rising receivables. So I just need to clarify this. If your free cash flow craters to negative $1.5 billion for the quarter, how exactly do you return $6 billion to your shareholders? Because they still managed $2.5 billion in buybacks and $3.5 in dividends.
Well, they just printed debt. It is roughly that simple.
Wait, they borrowed just to pay the dividend?
Short-term debt, yes. They issued over $5 billion in commercial paper during the quarter. So rather than pause the buybacks or skip the dividend, they just leveraged very cheap short-term debt to bridge the cash gap.
That feels a bit risky, does it not?
Is that capital discipline, or is that just protecting the stock price from a total revolt?
It is actually a perfectly rational smoothing mechanism. Look, you do not want to break your shareholder commitments over an accounting lag. That $3 billion downstream penalty we talked about, the mark-to-market issue, it is entirely on paper.
Right, because the actual physical oil is still valuable.
Exactly. CFO Amir Bonner actually laid this out. She said they expect roughly $1 billion of those paper positions to unwind favorably in the second quarter once the physical cargoes actually deliver. So the cash will show up.
Okay, so it really is just a $5 billion bridge loan against their own future inventory.
Right, because the core operations, the physical assets, they are actually running beautifully. Look at their Asian footprint right now.
Oh, the internal refinery optimization stuff?
Yes, I saw that. It is fascinating. Normally, that South Korean joint venture, GS Caltex, they buy mostly on the spot market. Historically, they run maybe 15% of Chevron's own equity crude. But because global shipping is so volatile right now, Chevron is bypassing the spot market almost completely for those sites. Worth said they expect to run over 40% equity crude into those Asian refineries in the second quarter.
Meaning they're piping their own new Permian and Hess supply directly into their own refineries on the other side of the planet.
Running at over 80% utilization, yes.
Capturing every single piece of margin along the way. That is genuinely brilliant defensive maneuvering against the global shipping chaos. Okay, so when you put all this together, you have the accounting traps masking strong core performance, the heavy use of commercial paper, and this really aggressive pivot into fueling tech giants. So where does this actually leave their trajectory heading into next quarter?
Well, it leaves them actually incredibly well positioned, although they are running a bit tight on the narrative. Look, they expect a massive cash influx very soon. Management guided for over $2 billion in added cash generation from equity affiliates next quarter. That is mostly their huge Kazakh joint venture, 10Gs. They are shifting it to monthly dividends just to fire hose cash back to the parent company.
Right. And you kind of need a fire hose when you just use short-term debt to float your dividend. But I think that fits their whole attitude. CFO Amir Bonner actually had this great quote on the call. She said, "You will see capital and cost discipline no matter what. You will see us invest in highly competitive assets no matter what." It felt very defiant.
Defiant? Sure. Or maybe just managing a jittery room. I mean, the physical numbers are sound. They kept their production growth target of 7 to 10% for the entire year. And they're holding the line on an $18 billion capex budget. It's a control system working as intended. But they do have some very quiet risks looming.
Like what exactly? Just those legal footnotes we skipped over?
Yeah, there's almost a $500 million U.S. downstream legal reserve loss that just sat quietly in the 8K filing. Plus, the open question of how long they can safely operate and collect massive debts down in Venezuela if political sanctions snap back. It's all perfectly fine until suddenly it's not.
That is the reality of operating globally, I guess. But stepping back from the immediate risks, I'm honestly fascinated by the identity shift here. Chevron is literally negotiating to be an exclusive, dedicated power utility for Microsoft's AI revolution. Meanwhile, they're aggressively shuffling their own Permian crude halfway across the world to bypass global spot markets in Seoul. The sheer scale of coordination is incredible.
It is a massive machine, and one that usually prints money, even when it looks temporarily broken on a quarterly spreadsheet. We'll definitely see if that billion-dollar accounting lag actually reverses next quarter like they promised.
We absolutely will be holding them to that. All right, that covers the numbers for today. Thanks for spending some time with Earnings Unscripted, everyone. We'll catch you after the next print.
See you then.
If you want these drops to just automatically show up in your app, definitely go ahead and follow the feed. We actually build this podcast using AI to help shape the voices and the scripts, really just to prove that technology can deliver a completely natural, human-sounding market chat. It's a fun, ongoing experiment. So if there is a ticker you want us to tackle next, just drop us a line at earningsunscripted@datamadness.ca. or grab the X link right in the show notes.
See you next time.